Welcome to the Chosson Shmooze that you wish you had but never got, part 2. I stress again that it is extremely important that whoever is listening to this listens to the discussions in sequential order from beginning to end, because there are many nuances that cannot be captured. This is a part of Torah Shabbal Peh that was always kept oral. Anything in writing is not fully conveying the idea, is not in perspective, not in balance, because these ideas are characterized and meant to be given from master to student, father to son, mother to daughter, in a way that's unique to that person's temperament. And no amount of writing could capture that particular nuance. Rav Kahana stayed under the bed of his master, Rebbe. I think it's a Gemara in Brachos on Samach Beis or Samach Aleph. He stayed under his bed to understand how he conducted himself in the bedroom. So I'm going to try as best as I can, because we must talk about these things today, because we are not a generation for subtlety. Certainly not, and everything's available online, and enough said about that. So I'm going to try, but I never will be able to do it fully. And I ask that the best chance that you could get the fullest context is by listening to everything in order and completely. Continuing yesterday's theme, before I start a new subject, pointing out that there are two other wonderful sources that talks about the symbolic representation of a marriage between a man and a woman and the relationship between a man and God. And one is the pasuk in Hosea, Perek Beis, that says that you'll be betrothed to me forever, ve'irastich li le'olam, ve'irastich li b'tzedek u'b'mishpat, you'll be betrothed to me in justice, in righteousness, v'yadatis Hashem, and you'll know Hashem. Now this verse is the same verse that you say when you wrap the ritzuos of your tefillin around your ring finger. There's nothing stronger than that to tell you that our tradition sees the marriage relationship, the love marriage relationship, even I should say the erotic marriage relationship, as a representation of man's connection to Hashem. And there's a pasuk in Bamidbar, Perek Zayin, pasuk Aleph, Vahi bayom kalos Moshe, when Moshe completed the Mishkan. But as you know, the Torah is what you call omni-significant, meaning that every verse, every nuance has a special meaning to it. And Rashi quotes a Tanchuma over there, saying that it's not al tikri kalos, ela Kallah. Don't call it kalos, which means to finish, but call it Kallah, like a bride, that Moshe was like a bride engaging with Hashem. Enough said on that topic. Today's topic we're going to explore is the idea of what is a Bashert. What does it mean that your spouse is a soulmate? And this is a fundamental principle, because in order to fully appreciate what marriage has to offer, we need to appreciate, all of us need to appreciate the gift we have in our spouse. And I don't want to wax poetic on this or not be practical and brass tacks. I'm not talking about something flowery. I'm talking about every day there is something extremely powerful and important represented within the relationship we have with our spouse. And in order to bring that out, there needs to be an appreciation. We need to appreciate what it really means to have a soulmate. And how do you know if you have a soulmate? So let's start out with an interesting Gemara on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph 7a in Sanhedrin. One of my favorite Gemaras. It's very witty. It says that when our love was strong, ki rechimtin have aziza, apus yedis afsir shechiven, we could lie comfortably on the blade of a sword. Hashta telo aziza rechimtin, now that our love is not so strong, Purya Barshitin Garmidi Lo Sagilon, a bed that's even 60 cubits wide is not big enough for us. Isn't that interesting? Love conquers all. And so when the love is strong any uncomfortable situation, even if your bed, as it were, is the edge of a sword, it's comfortable. But when your love is not strong, then even a bed that's 60 amos wide is not comfortable. And this is a fascinating idea because within many marriages, you see this polar dynamic that sometimes it's really good, and when it's really good, it's great. And sometimes it's really awful, and when it's really awful, it's awful. And another thing, a lot of times the very same qualities that attracted you to your spouse, that you found endearing, that you found exhilarating and challenging, somehow or another morphs into hateful and awful features and personality qualities that you start to resent. Isn't that really strange? And how do we explain that psychologically or mystically? Because in my mind, those two are linked, that psychology is just a secular effort to understand what goes on inside a person. What is a person composed of? What is their soul, in essence? And how do we explain this? And yet it's so true. So somebody might be very attracted to a spouse who is strong-minded and strong-willed and knows what they're doing, and then years later resent and consider those same qualities to be stubborn, bossy, controlling. Another person might be very attracted to a spouse who they consider to be quiet and demure and very feminine, and then find themselves very irritated with that same spouse for not being assertive enough, for not being practical enough. All these things, they come from somewhere, and we need to understand what's going on, because oftentimes the qualities are really the same. Even though the bed feels like it's a sword, or the bed feels like it's 60 amas wide, it's the same bed. It never changed. However, our feeling about things changed. So what does the Gemara have to teach us about this? So the Gemara in Sota says that Ein bezavgen lo la'adam ela isha lefi ma'asav. It says that a person doesn't get a spouse except somebody who they basically deserve. But there's two ways to look at that, of course, and some people who see God as this kind of punishing, irritated, fickle parent sees it as, oh, you get what you deserve. But actually, it's saying that you get somebody who is on your level. You get somebody who is fitting for where you're up to, for good or for bad. And your spouse represents a mirror of who you are. Your spouse, many of the problems or difficulties or challenges you experience with your spouse are a reflection, partially, of your weaknesses and your difficulties in areas that you need to grow. There's a famous, I think, idea from the Baal Shem that if you see somebody doing an Avera, it doesn't matter what the Avera is. So let's say you see somebody being Mechal Shabbos. In your mind, you have to understand that Hashem showed you that Avera. Hashem showed you that Avera because in some place in you, a shirish of that, a aspect of that is missing inside you. So of course, you're not going to be Mechal Shabbos, you're not going to desecrate the Sabbath, but there's some aspect of your Sabbath observance that is being desecrated. And that's why you're seeing, and you were made to see this thing. Now, it's interesting, again, the way in which mysticism and psychology works together, because from a mystical point of view, you would say that it's Hashem sent that to you as a wake-up call, and that's all fine and good. I appreciate that. From a psychological point of view, that's what we would call a projection, that, as it says, call a posel b'mumo posel. Whoever invalidates somebody with their own problem. So you're projecting outward and seeing this problem because you have a aspect of that problem inside yourself. Now, the Gemara in Sota raises a contradiction. The Gemara in Sota says, but we have another teaching. The other teaching is, Arboim Yom Kodim Yitziras Avlad, Yotzes Baskol, Vomeris Bas Ploni Leploni. 40 days before the embryo, or the fetus, I should say, starts to form, already a bas kol, a heavenly voice. By the way, many people mistake the word bas kol. People think bas kol means this loud, booming voice, like, from the Ten Commandments movie with Charlton Heston, with God booming out, the Ten Commandments. Actually, bas kol, it's not ben kol, it's bas kol, and it's a diminutive, right? The son of is always less than the thing itself. So a ben kol would be a lower voice than a kol, and a bas kol, because a female is considered less physically strong and aggressive, and especially a daughter, not a fully grown woman, a bas kol is a quiet, cold mamadaka, a quiet, still voice. It is a self-evident intuition that people who are listening very carefully can hear. So note this: a bas kol is not an announcement. A bas kol is a deeply felt, evident intuition coming from heaven. And it says that 40 days before the formation of the fetus, Plony is to Plony. The match is already made. So it's a contradiction. If the match is already made, what does it mean that a person marries somebody based on their qualities? So the Gemara says, Kam bezivik rishon, kam bezivik sheni. So the Gemara says that one is talking about the first marriage and one is talking about the second marriage, meaning the first marriage is based on the heavenly decree, and the second marriage is based on the degree of what you deserve. In other words, it's matched to based your actions. That if you get married a second time, whoever you're going to marry is going to be based on your actions. Now, there are different pshatim in what this means. Some say that it's not really a first marriage and a second marriage. Some say that the first marriage means the technical person who you marry, and the second marriage is like the soulmate, the one who you really belong to, and it may not be the same. Interestingly enough, the Meiri says something very powerful. The Meiri says it's not about first marriage and second marriage chronologically, although it can be chronological. The issue is the first marriage is something that happens when your slate is clean, meaning he even says before your bar mitzvah, or bat mitzvah. He's saying that the first marriage is what you would get based on your particular mazel, for good or for bad. In other words, who matches up with where you are as a person? But the Meiri says that a person could grow and get more developed, or a person could, further sink. So in reality, the person who they'll marry, their zivug sheni, will be based more on their actions. In other words, one is the template that if you don't change any which way, for better or for worse, who would be a good match for you? And the zivug sheni, the one that you get based on your acts, is who's going to fit you based on your personal development. Meiri says something very interesting too. He says that this is a principle in life, that it doesn't only apply to shidduchim, it applies to everything, that Hashem will send something to you based on what is developmentally on your level. All the things that happen to you, he says, except in rare occasions where you don't deserve to have any hashgacha, and then you are kind of buffeted by the sea and the waves of entropy and mazel. But he says, generally speaking, you get kind of what fits you. Now, this is fascinating because the way we could look at this, if we want to extend the idea, is zivug rishon and zivug sheni is not even about a first marriage or a second marriage. It could be about every day of your marriage, meaning whoever you marry will be, let's say, where you're up to. Now, what happens after that is up to the both of you. Either of you can develop further, or you can sink further. And what each of you are going to get has to do with more about what you're ready for right now and what you're able to take in and what you're able to change. So in essence, every day is a zivug sheni, because every day it's being renewed. There's a famous Chazon Ish idea about bitachon. The Chazon Ish, unlike other opinions, disclaimer, other opinions have a much more active sense of bitachon, but the Chazon Ish's idea of bitachon is not a belief, quote, that everything is going to turn out okay, like the way that I want it. The Chazon Ish's idea of bitachon and his maimer on bitachon is a belief that Hashem controls everything and that Hashem is doing everything that he thinks is good for me. Now, there's a very big difference because on the one hand, you can't just wish for something good and have bitachon and hope that it'll come true, even though there are other opinions that do in fact say that. Disclaimer again. But according to the Chazon Ish, what's happening is that Hashem will always give you actively what is coming to you and what is good for you actively. But that actually is fantastic too, because it means even cherev chad munachas al tzavaro, even if the sword is right on your neck, what's going to happen next only has to do with who you are and what you deserve now. So your zivuk sheni starts right now. Your second marriage could be to the first person that you're married to. It starts right now. What's going to happen between the two of you, and what's going to happen as you learn from each other, if you are willing to learn from each other, what's going to happen is going to become the new thing, the new you and the new spouse.